Namaste, Namaskaram, Vanakkam, Namo Namaha. Jai Ganesha, Jai Hindu Yoga Dharma. Let's go into something today that is really very much needed. We have these terms Indu Hindu and Rita and Vedic Dharma, Yoga Dharma, and then Sanatana Dharma. And we want to look closely at these words. So this is an essay, and it's going to focus on language and history and also a mystical silence, if you will, and the danger of turning the eternal into a thing. So there's often a debate, even among Hindus, who say Hindu is a false word. Think of how counterproductive that is. And the original word is Sanatana Dharma. Is that true? Now, generally, what one is doing here is pointing to a specific thing which really defies the very meaning of Sanatan, or eternal. So we need to dive deeply into this one. When did this word, Sanatan, first appear? Was it not later in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata? And does it not have a strong connection to Vaishnavism? Hence, in an oxymoronic way, making Sanatana now a thing, and specifically Vaishnava Hinduism, or just Vaishnava, without the Hindu. Do we have an oxymoronic situation going on here? Do we have a fundamentalist mindset going on here? A fundamentalist universalist mindset? We'll tackle that when we talk about our Nat principle. When we speak, for example, about non-duality or something that's eternal, are we sure that we know what's eternal? Can we speak about something non-dual? This is why yogis like Gorakanath said, Yatovacho nivartante aprapyas manasa saha, and he was also quoting from the Upanishads, the Taittiriya Upanishad. This experience, nivartante, is beyond speech, and even beyond the very mind that seeks to comprehend it. Remember, folks, we call that inner essence Atmana, not soul. So sometimes we casually use that, but soul is still connected to the psyche or the mind, whereas Atmana is not. So when we use the word eternal or Sanatan, what's eternal? Is anything eternal? Is any specific religion eternal? Of course not. No thing perhaps eternally is. Christian apologists will often ask those who say they do not believe in God, how do you get something from nothing? A contemplative answer is you don't, because nothing doesn't exist. Show me nothing. And to say nothing exists is oxymoronic. Game over. If nothing exists, then it's already not nothing. If it has become an object of thought, a word, a concept, a mental placeholder, the mind then grasps it, and therefore it's not nothing. The next question is often, if not nothing, then what is the something that exists? The apologetic answer, of course, is God, but the mystical answer is subtle and more dangerous to the ordinary mind. No thing. Not nothing, but no thing. This is not merely wordplay, it's a profound distinction. Nothing suggests non-existence, blank absence, void as negation. No thing points toward that which is not an object among objects. It is not one more thing in the universe. It is not another item placed beside mountains, stars, temples, etc. It's not a thing. It is the ground, if you want to use that word, before thingness. The silent source before conceptual division. Science concurs. 95% of the universe, the no thing. Not nothing, but then we have to dive into what is that something that is the nothingness. Vedantists often play the game of neti neti, not this and not that. When asked, what is this no thing that exists? The deepest answer is not another argument. The deepest answer is in other words, mouth closed, eyes closed, silence. This is where philosophy becomes the essence of yoga. Yuj Atman Brahman Cha. This is where the mind reaches its limit and has to bow. One must go ethically out of one's mind. Now, this is where the word Sanatana can become meaningful if we are careful not to turn it into the very thing it is pointing beyond. Munis or silent yogis and the silent sage Dakshinamurti, a form of Shiva, exemplify an experience of the eternal no-thingness. So, let us show how oxymoronic this is to try to take the words Sanatana Dharma and make this into what is actually the fully recognized Hindu religion, Hindu Dharma, Hinduism. Those who try to make this the one religion from which everything else came defies the purpose of Sanatana. The mystical mindset realizes that the deepest experience is found in silence itself. As soon as we put a label on it, much less the thought, we're already entering into the world of duality, of temporary things. Religious tradition is the vehicle to the incorporeal. A tradition can preserve methods, rituals, disciplines, philosophical inquiry, symbolic forms, and in Hinduism, mantras, guru parampara, karma, bhakti, raja, jnana, hatha mantra, japa, nada, nata. A tradition can carry the seeker toward the threshold of realization, perhaps. But the tradition is not the final silence itself. This distinction is absolutely essential. The boat may be sacred, but the boat is not the shore. The mantra is sacred, of course, but the mantra is not the silence into which it dissolves. A temple is sacred, of course, but the temple is not the boundless reality toward which it directs one's mind and heart, if you will. The guru is sacred, but the guru points beyond the ego, beyond himself, beyond the very mind that wants to possess truth. The era begins when the ego returns after perhaps touching silence and says, my tradition owns the eternal. A second era says all traditions are the same, so no particular tradition matters. A third, subtler era says the truth is beyond all words, and the correct word for it is ours. That is the contradiction of the fundamentalist universalist. In our Nat language, the way says, my tradition alone owns the eternal. No way or always says all traditions are really the same, so distinctions don't matter. A way in the middle says, my tradition is a sacred way toward the eternal, but the eternal itself is no thing and cannot be reduced to anyone's thing or exclusive tradition. So, the Sanskrit Hindu word Sanatana implies eternal, yes, abiding, beginningless, timeless. It does not merely mean ancient in the historical sense or timeless. Something may be very old and still not be Sanatana. A manuscript may be ancient, a temple may be ancient, a ritual may be ancient, a lineage is ancient, but the eternal is not merely old. The eternal is not measured by age at all, because age belongs to time. Therefore, if Sanatana is used carefully, it does not point merely to a historical institution or, of course, any sectarian identity. It points toward the eternal principle, the ungraspable ground, the no thing that cannot be possessed by language, even by thought. But when Sanatana turns into a slogan, a polemic, a replacement brand, or a sectarian boundary marker, the word begins to betray its own depth. It's oxymoronic to take a word that should point beyond thingness and then use it to construct a thing. To take a word that gestures toward the eternal and then reduce that word to a social identity badge. To take a word that should humble speech and then use it as an argumentative sense of superiority. Now, what did Sanatana Dharma mean in Scripture? The phrase does appear in Sanskrit sources, but its early usage is not usually a fixed proper noun meaning any single religion now called Hinduism. More often, it means an eternal dharma, an ancient or abiding law, an enduring duty, a timeless truth, or a sustainable principle. This distinction is vital for intellectual honesty. For example, in the Manusmriti 4:138, they use the phrase Esa dharmaha sanatanaha. In the ethical context of speech, one should speak truth pleasantly. One should not speak unpleasant truth or pleasant falsehood. This is the eternal Dharma. Functions now as an ethical principle, not as a denominational name. The Mahabharata contains related passages such as Satyam Dharmaha Sanatanaha. Truth is eternal Dharma. And role-specific expressions such as the eternal Dharma of kings. These are moral, social, ritual, and metaphysical uses of Dharma qualified by Sanatana. They are not yet the modern religious identity claim that Sanatana Dharma is simply the original single source. The Bhagavata Purana and other Vaishnava contexts do give the phrase a strong theological coloring, especially when eternal Dharma is connected to Narayana, Krishna, Bhakti, or the eternal service nature of the jiva. This perhaps is looked beautifully at within the Vaishnava Sampradaya. The problem, however, begins when any Sampradaya, when their interpretation becomes a universal replacement for the whole Hindu family or religious family in general. And also when it denies the legitimacy of the historical word Hindu. Thus, a balanced statement is Sanatana Dharma is an ancient Sanskrit expression, but its common modern usage as a general synonym for Hinduism appears to become prominent in late colonial and revisionist discourse. It was not originally a single universal fixed proper name for every religious, philosophical, ritual, devotional, Vedic, Tantric, Saiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, Smarta, and folk stream that's now gathered under the broad historical family named Hinduism. So now this brings us to the word Indu Hindu. Some object that Hindu is an outside word, shaped by geography, language change, and foreign recognition. And that's not automatically a defect. Many civilizational names are shaped through contact. A word can begin as a geographical marker and later become a historical, cultural, religious, and civilizational self-name. The refined historical sequence may be stated this way. Sindhu, Indu names the river and the region. Through Old Persian sound change, Sindhu, Indu becomes Hindu. Through Greek and Latin roots, related forms become Indos and India. The word Hindu first functioned then primarily as a geographical and civilizational designation for the people and the lands around and beyond the Indus. A scholarly caveat is necessary. We cannot say that the Indus Valley civilization called itself Hindu, or Sanatana Dharma, of course. Its language and self-designation remain unknown. Names such as Indus Valley civilization are modern scholarly labels. Intellectual humility requires that we do not project later words backward as proven ancient self-names. Still, once the Sindhu, Indus, Hindu recognition line emerges historically, Hindu becomes a powerful name for the broad civilizational family. Therefore, Hindu is not a false word merely because it has external geographical history. It is a historical name that came to identify a vast family of related traditions. So importantly, when we look at Indu Hindu, yes, it's a geographical location, but it also designates the people living there and thus their practices. Just like if you come from New Jersey, for example, in the United States, you're called a Jerseyite. And they're recognized by a certain culture, if you will. But beautifully, if you look up Indu in a Sanskrit dictionary, it also refers to Chandra, the moon, and Shiva, obviously. The rivers, Indus River, Sarid, also associated with our Matajis. And also it's associated with the word Bindu, the red dot, the sun, if you will, Surya, Vishnu, and the Soma nectar within all of us. It's a beautiful, all-encompassing word, Indu. Chandra, Sarid, Soma, Bindu. And this is what it means to be an Indu Hindu. And there's also an Indus constellation. So from the earth to the cosmos and everything in between, from our point of view. So now let's look at the word Ritta, the Vedic root of the cosmic order. If Hindu names the historical civilizational family, then Ritta may be one of the earliest Vedic conceptual keys to what later became Dharma. In the Rig Veda, Ritta is the first written word for what we would come to later call Dharma, and then Vedic Dharma, Yoga Dharma, and much later Sanatana Dharma. Ritta names cosmic order, truth, rightness, rhythm, regularity, and a moral ritual structure by which the cosmos is sustained. So it's not just social duty, it's the order of reality. Ritta is connected with Satya, truth, and with Yajna, the sacrificial order. Satyam Rittam Cha, truth and order. It's also linked with Varuna and Mitra and Agni, Ushas, the waters, the cosmic regularities. It is the principle by which reality does not collapse into chaos. In this sense, Ritta is a profound ancestor of the words Dharma and Satya and Karma, and later Hindu understandings of order, duty, truth. The teaching sequence here becomes compelling. First we have Sindhu, Indu, Hindu as a geographical and civilizational recognition. then Ritta as the Vedic name for the cosmic moral order, then Dharma as the broader sustaining principle, then we could say Vedic Dharma and Yoga Dharma as streams of religious and spiritual practice, if you will, and only later Sanatana Dharma as a beautiful phrase that increasingly comes to name these principles of Ritta and Dharma, and in the modern usage, Hinduism itself. Now it's interesting that Dharma, this profound Sanskrit word, is similar to religion, religio, that which binds, holds, ties one together. Dharma comes from the root dri, which means to hold, support, sustain. Dharma, then, is that which we recognize holding things together. It's often defined as Hindu religious law, duty, nature, righteousness, teachings, way, order, practice, sustaining principles. Dharma takes the cosmic intuition of Ritta and brings it into human, social, ritual, ethical, religious life. Again, like the word religion, which comes from the root religio, religare, Dharma includes what sustains the individual, the family, the society, the cosmos, the ritual order, the moral order, and the spiritual aspirations. This is why Hindu Dharma remains a relevant and important phrase. It means a sustaining order, teaching, practice, and the way preserved within the Hindu civilizational family. It allows plurality without dissolving identity. It allows the sampradayas without reducing the whole to one sect. It allows philosophy and ritual, temple, and the various yogas, household life, and renunciation. So interestingly, if we look at the root meaning of religion, religio, religare, which we use in our popular English language around the world, it simply and profoundly means to yoke, to tie, to bind, to link. In other words, in essence, is this not what all of us are trying to do? We're trying to figure out what ties, what binds, what links us together. So in that sense, we're all religio. Now, at this point in history, there are many established religious traditions, ways that have developed over the eons of time. And one can choose to follow one of those religious traditions or not, but regardless, the mere fact we're all trying to get our act together, so to speak, to tie ourselves, to bind ourselves together, individually, collectively, family, spouse, friends, community, we're all religious, as religio. Very important clarification. Then if we choose to find one of the religions of the world, we might be born into one, we might not. We might find one that suits us later in life, right? But we're still religio in that sense. However, once we decide on one, then obviously we follow it through. It's something that appeals to us, like anything in life, a profession, for example. And we follow it through. And then that would be absolutely necessary before one would ever attempt to teach that. So this is relevant to today's yoga, because yoga is already taken, so to speak. It's already part and parcel of what we know as the Hindu religion. Vedic Dharma, Yoga Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. One can perhaps be born into it, or they may join it later in life. But again, true to all the established religious paths of the world, in order to teach it, one would have to be fully immersed in that path. That's why today's yoga is so disingenuous, because the teachers are primarily not Hindus. It defies logic, actually. So another interesting thing about the word Indu or Hindu is that our Latin-speaking friends, because they don't pronounce the letter H, this is a little bit humorous, but it shows that we know what we're talking about when we say Indu, Hindu. They don't pronounce H, so when they see the word Hindu, they say, oh, you're an Indu. and your religion is Hinduismo. Ismo is ism in Spanish. Hinduismo. And they understand that. So get over this, my fellow Hindus, right? That Hindu is really a foreign word. It's just a different pronunciation. You can say Hindu if you want. Fine. No problem. So let's go back for a moment to, again, these primary terms. Indu, Hindu, Ritta, Vedic Dharma, Yoga Dharma. So Yoga Dharma, right, that refers to the path, really. It is yoga that is the sustaining process of Hindu Dharma. And it comes from the root yuj, meaning to yoke. In other words, the very meaning of the Sanskrit Hindu word yoga, yuj atman brahman cha, is what this religion known as Hindu Dharma, Hinduism, is all about. To yoke, Y-O-K-E, just like religio, to yoke, to join, to what? In this case, specifically, our Atmana, our word for the inner essence. And then Brahman, which is nothing to do with God, my friends. God's an anthropomorphic deity. Brahman is a neuter term for the greater forces of Sat Chit Ananda, Jyoti Shakti Ananda Shanti. So yoga is Hinduism in historical, textual, philosophical, and religious practice. So, back to the word Sanatan. Again, we have to be a little bit humble when we use this phrase. Right? It's beautiful when it points to the eternal. Actually, that which cannot be spoken of. But it becomes dangerous when it's used to erase history, to deny the word Hindu, to flatten all the sampradayas, or to claim any kind of sectarian supremacy. The problem is not the phrase, the problem is the redefinition of the phrase, the reification, which means turning an abstract pointer into a living principle, into a hard object. The word Sanatana should actually soften our ego into humility before that of which we cannot speak, before the eternal, if you will. But it can be misused to harden the ego into a claim. Our tradition is the one eternal tradition, the one universal tradition, the original source of all others, the most important religion, the final name. That is where the mystical insight is totally lost. To say Sanatana Dharma is the eternal principle at the heart of Hindu Dharma is okay, that's profound. But to say Hinduism is a false word and only Sanatana Dharma is real, that's historically and philosophically unstable. To say Sanatana Dharma means my sectarian interpretation alone is even more problematic. It turns a beautiful no thing into a sectarian thing. And again, there is a strong Vaishnava connection in many of the modern explanations of Sanatana Dharma. To some in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, Sanatana Dharma is described as the eternal function, the loving service to Bhagavan, Krishna, or Narayana. Within Vaishnava theology, this can be meaningful, devotional, and powerful, but a Vaishnava interpretation is not the same as the entire Hindu family. We have Saiva Hindus, we have Shaktite Hindus, we have Smartas. Therefore, if Sanatana Dharma is made exclusively Vaishnava, then this universal word has been narrowed, to say the least. If it is made into an anti-Hindu replacement, then we've really shot ourselves in the foot. That's a historical fact that's denied. If it is made into a claim that one tradition owns the eternal, then the eternal has been turned into a thing. Now let's examine here our Nat principle. This helps to clarify the problem, not only within Hinduism, but within the vast array of religions that we see today. The way the extremist says our formulation alone is the eternal truth. This is the pure, if you will, fundamentalist. And the claim is that all others must be subordinate to it. The other extreme, the no way, which is actually becomes always, it's a fundamentalist universalist mindset. It is saying that all formulations are the same, no distinctions. And a way says this is a middle, balanced, sacred way, rooted in a real tradition. It does not own the no thing beyond all words, whereas fundamentalism turns tradition into ownership. The opposite extreme of fundamentalist universalism turns mystical silence into a universal brand. It says that everything is beyond words and then insists that its own word is the final universal word. This is New Age yoga today. It claims to transcend sectarianism while quietly enthroning its own sectarian or civilizational vocabulary over all others. And this is why, again, the phrase Sanatana Dharma must be handled with both reverence and care. It can open the mind toward that which is eternal. But it can also be misused to close the mind around an identity. So to conclude, Sanatana points towards the no thing. That eternal ground, that reality beyond speech, and even the mind itself. Hinduism names the historical family that preserved countless ways of approaching the eternal, if you will. Sampradaya names a particular lineage or path within the Hindu family. Rita names the sustaining order. Rita names the Vedic cosmic root of that order. Therefore, the work here is not to abandon the word Indu-Hindu, nor to weaponize the word Sanatana. The work is to restore balance. So we should be able to say Hindu Dharma with dignity. We can say Sanatana Dharma with reverence. And we can also say Saiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, Smarta, Vedic, Tantric, Yogic, Vedantic with clarity. We can honor each without collapsing all into one or setting one against the other. The mystical mind bows before silence. The fundamentalist mind turns silence into ownership. The fundamentalist universalist mind turns silence into a universal brand. The dharmic mind is balanced on the razor's edge. As one mystic said, this mystical path is like walking on a bridge of hair over a river of fire. And this razor's edge lets the tradition remain a sacred vehicle, while remembering that the eternal itself is no thing. So when someone asks what is eternal, the answer is not an object. The answer is not a slogan. The answer is not a victory in debate. The answer is silence. Munimula, the root of silence. Eyes closed, mind stilled, mouth closed.